Hello, everyone. My name is Vukašin Stojkov, and I am a founder of Tesla Nation and Started. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening for the first Tesla Nation business event. As many of you may know, Tesla Nation is a project that started as an idea a couple of years ago with the basic premise that in order for a society to be progressive and to be successful, the economic basis of that society needs to be very strong. In that sense, technology and tech business present a fairly big opportunity for Serbia, which, as we know, is a relatively small country with an economy that can leave more to be desired, or we can say that we have a lot of space for advancement. Aside from technology, a huge part of contemporary business is being able to turn your innovativeness, your technological solutions into well-functioning businesses. Businesses that require being able to communicate what value you're offering, being able to market and sell what you're offering. And in that sense, one of the premises of Tesla Nation is that the best way for an economy to develop is to connect itself to, essentially the most advanced economy in the world, which is the United States. If we take a look at some of the economies that have progressed the most and fastest throughout the last 50 to 70 years, we can see a clear connection between those societies being connected and integrated with the economy of the United States. Here we can talk about the likes of Germany or Japan, South Korea, and most recently, and at these times, somewhat even controversially, China. An advancement of this sort, avant-garde in a way for the Serbian connection to the United States economy is, of course, Nikola Tesla, who is a Serbian inventor who came over to the United States because he recognized that he can make most of his ideas come true there. In the meantime, we've been lucky that the world has become smaller, that we have inventions like the internet, and that we do not necessarily have to be present in the United States in order to, create economic value together with partners from the United States and intended for the US market. One thing that we do need to be aware of is the culture and the mores and the skills that are needed for folks from one society, from Serbia, to be able to connect with partners in the US and to be able to successfully enter that market. This is a core part of the mission of Tesla Nation, and of course, this is the goal of the project, of the event that we're having tonight. One thing that I wanted to just add in this intro is that Tesla Nation is a non-government, community-based initiative. And in the past several years, we've been able, and we've been actually very lucky to achieve a fine amount of success in terms of connecting dozens of entrepreneurs and business people between the United States and Serbia, which have collectively brought something north of €1 million into Serbia due to their cooperation. And we've been even able to get a number of technology companies co-founded between entrepreneurs in Serbia and the US. Some already known and some going in progress as we speak. One thing that is important to us to make sure that we communicate is the fact that we've been extremely lucky that in those efforts we've been able to count on the support of many of our partners who have funded the work of Tesla Nation so far. Since I mentioned the number of something north of €1 million, looking at the support from our partners so far, we have been able to achieve a significant, I would say, return of investment, starting from something like 50,000 euros invested into destination to get to that result so far. We've been also lucky, apart from having amazing partners which have made this initiative possible. We've been lucky to get a very, very significant support from a number of Tesla Nation ambassadors. These are community and business leaders, mostly from the United States. Some of them of Serbian descent, some of them who are not, but who have all recognized, well, I would say the true and pure intention of the Tesla Nation initiative to create a better society, which can, well, then get on to create value for the world by helping scale innovation and initiatives here from Serbia to the rest of the world. And tonight we have two such ambassadors here with us. Of course, we're as you may have seen, we are very lucky to have with us Joanne Gouaux from the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, and Dušan Vujović, who is coming to us from New York. Going forward, we'll first hear a couple of inputs from Dušan on how we can successfully, well, sell on the US market, what kinds of skills and which kinds of inputs we need to be aware of when we are trying to sell in that market. And later on from Joanne, we'll be hearing about business communication, mores and inputs that we need to be aware of when we are negotiating or simply chatting with American partners. So first off, I'd like to welcome Dušan on the stage, who will be sharing his experiences with us. Dušan is a president at InBev, which is a Fortune 500 global company with a market cap of north of $100 billion, and who is handling a very, I would say, responsible portfolio of sales within that organization. So Dušan, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being willing to share some of your learnings and experience with our audience and the Serbian entrepreneurial community in general.
No, it's my pleasure. And if I knew you're going to introduce me so well, I'm going to say I'm going to do it every time. I mean, it's a great introduction. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
So look, first, it's a great honor to be here. I think, you and I spoke initially when you guys were thinking of launching this, and I said, whatever I can help. I'm still yet to help, but I'm sure I will be able to. So I have the will and I think the knowledge to do so. But I think this is a great initiative. I think that branding it at Tesla, which is very known in US, having a clear goal, I think it's very good, and I think it's going to be very successful. And I think it's well due for us as a country to have something like this. So congrats to you, first of all.
Well, I would also say that we still need to do many more things in order to be worthy of your support so far. I just have to say that it has been very, very motivating for myself and my team, that whenever I came up to you with an email or a phone call, even before we knew each other, you were like, okay, let me know how, where, and when I can help. So it's been really, really, really appreciated. So as far as I understand, you have prepared a couple of slides that might help our audience to gain an understanding on how to think about sales in general and in the US market in particular.
Yeah, I think, and as we spoke, I think, part of it, I think the few minutes I'll spend just explaining my career path, I think might be helpful for people to see what was my path from Serbia, through Asia to US. Now the second time, I think it's interesting. Maybe some people can relate to, maybe it will be helpful. And then I did more, not sales skills, but more soft skills that I think, when you go to a culture like US, it's such a big country, diverse, some of the things you should keep in mind as you go into, it doesn't matter if you work from Serbia with US or if you relocate to US. I think these are some of the things you should keep top of mind, because I think they're useful and can only help you in the long run.
Super. So could you talk us through your career path? Obviously, you are from Serbia, and it seems that as a very, very young person, you are at a very, very high responsibility role in one of the biggest corporations, in the world. So how did that happen? That doesn't. I don't think that happens every day.
Yeah, it doesn't, and you'll see in a few slides. I think to succeed and to be fortunate as I am in some regards when it comes to corporate, you need a lot of luck, but you need a lot of persistency, resilience, and a hunger, right? I'm fortunate to come from a very pretty wealthy family, I would say, given where we grew up. But I think I was always pushed to do more, was rewarded to do more, and was incentivized to appreciate things that you earn more than the ones you get. So, I was fortunate to have good bosses, people that saw potential in me, spent time to educate me, trust in me. And as I was getting these opportunities, as I was growing within the company, I felt like I was becoming a leader in a way to that regards, to be able to do that with younger people who are starting right now, just as I was. I'm in this company almost 15 years now. So, very fortunate, but, a lot of hard work, I would say, and a lot of luck. I mean, I don't think you can get to many places without luck. And I think you need to create your own luck, but it's part of it.
Yeah, so far I don't think I've seen folks that had what we might describe as huge success without both parts, being extremely hardworking and having a bit of luck. So we'll have the opportunity to chat a bit more and ask questions, and I think that the audience might pose some questions as well. So I would suppose that we get into your slides and
Sure.
sort of get that out of the way, so we can then continue chatting. That's all right.
All right, let's do it. So as Vukasin said, my name is Dušan Vujović. I'm born and raised in Belgrade for not too long time. I had a fortune to travel, a few continents to live there, work in different places, kind of go around the world, which I think I'll explain in a bit. But, I always like to start every time I have a presentation, kind of what I consider my universe, my world. And I always think of myself to have two universes, the micro and the macro universe, right? To me, my wife, we've been, dating and married for 7 years now almost. So, pretty long time. And out of that relationship, we have, I think, 2, soon 3 beautiful kids, Philip and Una. They kind of take a lot of our time and energy, which I'm fortunate. I think, COVID did a lot of bad things for many folks. I was fortunate to be in a stable industry, but also to be able to spend time with my kids on a daily level, which, as most of you probably don't have that. It's I travel a lot every week, so it's kind of tough. As I said, third on the way. And, my life philosophy is I don't try to mix these two things together. I kind of like to, keep my family on one side.
So, guys, I think that we might be experiencing some technical issues. So, please bear with us for a couple of moments until we sort out the hardware.
I think we're back. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
We're good.
Where do I start? Do I go back or we just keep on going? Keep going?
So
all right.
Perhaps going one slide back would be good. Yeah.
All right. So let me reset. I think, as I was saying, right, I think, I have two universes, right? My micro universe, which is my family. I have a lovely wife, and as a result of that, I have two lovely kids, Philip and Una, and a third one coming very soon in November. So we're going to have our hands even more full, which is great. And I mentioned, I don't know if you heard, I think COVID helped me to really spend time with them, which, I was very fortunate to work from home, see them every day. And I like to say I kind of keep my business and my problems at work and my career ambitions kind of separate from family. And every time I walk through the door, I'm kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, this is a different world, don't mix them. I think it's important. And I think life philosophy, right, to manage to do that, this is one, I think, quote that I keep saying probably on a monthly level a dozen times. I think, the Lao Tzu, which is a Chinese philosopher, great books, read them, read his quotes, but the one that goes that if you're angry, you live in the past, if you worry, you live in the future, and if you're calm, you live in the present. So I told this to a few folks. They're kind of, maybe they're not saying the truth, but they said they're also using it in the times of uncertainty, in the times of when you're upset. Kind of say to yourself, I think it helps a lot, and I'm a big believer in this. So kind of my journey, as I said, I was born in Belgrade, now 38 years ago, so pretty old already. I kind of hate to say my age, but probably in 10 years, I'll be jealous of today. I'll never be as young as I'm today. Like, that's my joke. So my family, my dad got expatriated to China. He worked for an international company that opened a factory there that's had subsidiary in Belgrade. They said, why don't you go and run it? China in 1998 was very different than today. There were more bugs than cars, less foreigners than I don't know what. So, unique experience. I'll admit, I was going to a Chinese school. I already spoke English. My parents said, you might as well learn Chinese. So that was really tough. I kind of cried every day when I got back from school. That lasted about a half a year. I wanted to go back. I don't know if it's because it was tough or I missed my friends, but that kind of went away. I got used to it. I actually kind of liked it then. Spent good 3 years there. And then my dad, was sent back, and we said, okay, I'm going to go my fourth year of high school, my senior year, to US, which, then I moved and, went to fourth year of high school, university there. Did a double major, managed informational systems and organizational management at El Salle University, which is a pretty good business, small private university, right outside of Philly. Great school. I was very fortunate to meet a lot of good friends that I'm still good with right now, and I liked it. Then I was debating, should I stay within, Philadelphia or US and go to work at a company, or do I want to go back? At that age, I said, why don't I go back? Things were getting better in Serbia, opening up, and why don't I go and try there? If I can just get the deck, I don't see the deck on the, yep, awesome. So then I did a 360, then I went back to Serbia, and I, was looking what I'm going to do, started working, and, I saw an ad in, an InfoStud, which just kind of started, I think, back then. I'm not sure, maybe it was earlier. And the ad said, own your future. It was by the company InBev. Never heard of the company. I kind of double clicked and I saw that they own most of the beers that I was drinking at that time. I was drinking a lot of beer, and I said, man, this is really good. It's a global training program, first year, great company. You go around the world, they're going to train you for a year, great everything. And I said, I really got to get it, right? It was 6 rounds, multiple countries, and I got it. I was one of the 600 people, the only one that got it in Serbia. It was tremendous experience. Lots of questions by the local people, well, who I am, why am I here? They didn't go easy on me, but great learning experience. I remember the first day I got into the car, I was like, hey, I speak Chinese. Maybe one day I can go to China. They said, take your time. Maybe in a few years it'll go. You never know. So, they sold the business. The mother company sold the business in 2010. And I didn't know they already spoke about me because they knew I speak Chinese. And the day they sold, they gave me a phone call. They said, hey, would you like to go to China? I'm like, when do you want me to fly? So then I was, transferred to China, which was a great experience. I spent 6 years in Shanghai with, brought 2 of my best friends to live there as well. We kind of created our own community, great time in Shanghai after the World Expo. A lot of foreigners moving. That city is, who hasn't been, you should go. It's really, I think, the city of future. And it was great. And then I was fortunate to go again to US, which, New York, center of the world. I still think Shanghai is better. My wife would disagree, but, I still think it is. I was tasked to run an imports and craft business, which was, one of the biggest bets for the company at that time and still is. And I thought it was a really good experience to go there as an expat and do it. Now, by the sheer logic, my next step I would go to Serbia. I don't think, hopefully that's my next step for the time being. I think at some point I definitely want to settle in here and be back, but that's the experience, right? If you look at my corporate, the company I've been, as I said, 14 years, the only other corporate experience I went to and started working for a UniCredit bank for 3 months. And there was a lady that when she met me, she shook my hand. She saw my level of energy. She was like, you know what? My name is Natasha, but I don't think this work's going to be a good fit for you, right? And I was like, man, how do you say that? You just shook my hand. You've never seen me work. 2 months it took me to learn she was right. 3 months to quit. Luckily, this new job that I applied 5 months before, because it took almost a year to get in, I got it. So I went, multiple roles in Serbia. Then I said, move to China. I had multiple roles there. And then at the end, now I'm in New York. Actually, I just moved to Miami. They let me go there because of the family. And we opened an office there, which was, super, super exciting. Then on top of this, in the meantime, I always, my life philosophy is that to be safe, you need 3 sources of income. Not necessarily equal income, not necessarily as ambitious or important, but, I like to invest. I like to be as independent as I can, right? So what I did is I invested in agriculture here for my big first incentive. I'm a big believer that agriculture together with IT is the biggest bet Serbia should do. So that has been going well. And recently, due to COVID and everything, I kind of got into this online fitness business where, just because of my necessity, because I was working here with a trainer who had COVID, I was working online. Then I started doing that when I went back to US. Then I said, why don't we do this with more people? Then few people tried it, they liked it. And now we have almost 100 clients business. We're growing, very fast, kind of looking for more trainers. I'll talk to more about this, but, very good experience to also learn from your own entrepreneurial business in Serbia, but also in US, kind of what are the things that are important to run your own business and start from scratch. So just a few things, I think some of my advice is for all of you that you might use or not. It's, don't get me wrong, you're going to see it's my personal opinions. There are some stereotypes here, so don't get offended. If you're Serbian, if you're not, it's kind of my experience. And then see if you can incorporate, if they might be useful for you at some point, as I mentioned, right? So the way I split this is some basic things. I think if you don't do these and you want to work with US or in US, you're most likely going to fail or look silly. I don't want to use a stronger word, but it's about culture, local culture, and basic communication. If you want to start winning and being successful, I think you got to understand diversity and inclusion, which is a very hot topic in US and across the world, and I think it should be. I think you need to simplify things, and I think it's all about simplicity. And one thing I added, which is follow-ups. I think people still don't understand how critical are follow-ups and understanding of what you should do after a meeting, after an interview, after a good deal closure, whatever, what is a follow-up. And then in order to last, the way I put it, I think you need to network as much as you can. It's one thing that I've seen many people fail, and I haven't done it initially. And I learned it on my own. And I think the last piece is this credibility and reputation, because if you don't work on it from the day one, doesn't matter if you're in a restaurant, if you're in an online business, if you're in an SEO business, if you're in a programming business, it's, I think, all about credibility and reputation, that people will look and judge you based on that. So, culture, I'm not going to go too many things, but you really need to understand, respect, and adapt to it. I think you need to know the basics, right? If you go to US, you need to know what are the holidays, what do people like, what do people don't like. You need to spend time understanding where do they come from. It's very different to work in New York than in Midwest or on the West Coast. There are different styles of doing business. There are different ethics. So I think understanding that is important. I think, we need to respect the culture. You don't need to love it. You don't need to agree with it. But you are working with a different country. You live maybe in a different culture. So try to respect it, because I think that's the right thing to do. Don't judge it every time it's different than what you're on. I grew up in Beijing in '98, and I can tell you hundreds of things that gross me out. 50 of them probably now understand. 50 I might never understand, but it's not their problem. We're just different. Just like Americans are different than Serbians. We might look strange to them on some things. They seem to us strange. And again, try to adapt to a degree that you feel it's appropriate, you feel you should, because again, that way you show you care and you want to be part of a community. You don't want to be there to earn money and run away with it or feel, live in a bubble. You should try to adapt, right? So again, very basic. Also goes on communication. I don't refer here just on the language piece or, gestures, but the tone, what is appropriate, right? From eye, looking people in the eye, the handshake, giving personal space to people, the tone, I think as Serbians, and I got that feedback quite a bit of times, we are pretty direct, pretty loud. Sometimes people think we're angry or aggressive, right? We need to learn how to adjust to that, right? I know in a business sense doesn't always mean no. Sometimes they say no, but again, as we talk follow-ups, it means maybe it's a yes later or a yes. I went to many meetings and they say, yes, we love it, great. Okay, we don't want to do a deal. Nah, you know what? I'm not sure we're going to do the deal. And you're like, man, but it was all good. No, people are just polite. It's a different way of doing business, right? So don't take it as a negative. Just adapt to it and try to understand, and it's going to be fine, right? So 2 basic things: culture, communication. I don't think this comes as a surprise, right? Then I think one that I think is very polarizing, but I don't think it should be, in my personal mind, again, my opinion. I'm not talking here just on very basic ones that are also relevant in Serbia, like LGBT rights. I'm talking more of, people should not be segregated, or there should not be any racism on religion, color, background, ethnicity, right? These are the things that they're going right now in US, and I think they're happening here in Serbia. And I think it's completely wrong. I think it should be, and again, my opinion, everybody should be treated based on who they are, what kind of work they do. I think I'm colorblind. I have people that are black, that are white, that are from different ethnicity, and I don't care, honestly, and I don't think we should care. And I think I think we should embrace people that are different, because they do bring different perspectives. They do bring different ideas, different experiences. And I'm very fortunate to work in my own team. I have about 400 people that I have on my team in US, very different backgrounds, great mix of people. And I think as we mix it even more, as we think about these things, and I'm not saying put quotes on how many females, males you have, black or white, whatever, that should come natural. And if you look at the mix of those people in US, that should be the reflection in your company, right? If it's not, there's something wrong, right? So I think very important. And I think for us as Serbians, I think many people have a very hard stand on this. I think we need to adjust and accept and learn, which is very important, right? So critical. I think this is really critical. Second one is you come, to a market as the big as, China or now US, where everything's really big. In most cases, very complicated, very complex. Every state has different laws. Like I said, different kind of way of doing business. People run things differently, right? In a complex environment, you need to go back and simplify, right? And the more you do it, the better. There's a great book by the ex-CEO of Procter & Gamble called Doing What Matters. And he talks about when he took the reins of Procter & Gamble, how he was so complicated. They had a lot of products, a lot of markets. And his whole mission was, how does he take all of that and simplify it and focus on things? Because when you simplify, what that enables you is to really clarify what matters, what is critical for you to succeed, zero in, laser focus, and make it happen, right? When I came to US from China, which was a complicated market, but much more simpler, I also started, I wanted to do many products, many different markets at the same time, different strategies, and it wasn't working. It was too complicated. I had to pivot, adjust, simplify, and then things were working. With the fitness startup business, I just started, we were offering a lot of things, nutrition, multiple ways of working out, different price tiers. It was a lot of things and people like confused. And you can see by question, hey, how do I do this? Whatever, how does this work? And trainers would ask questions. We said, guys, this is very complicated. Everybody's asking us tons of questions. So now you work out at your home with no basic equipment. There are 3 price tiers. That's our business. We have a target market. That's it. People love it. It's super clear for them, and it's easy for us. We're more efficient. We're more cost effective. So if you go to a market like this, simplify. If people have questions, if people have doubts, it's complicated, simplify. And one thing that is interesting, I was thinking, should I put it there or not, is the follow-up, right? I think there's an amazing stat I lots of time mentioning to my team about it takes 5 follow-ups to lock. In 80% of time, it takes 5 follow-ups to lock a deal. However, 50% of people give up after a first try, right? So you can see how many unfulfilled demand or opportunities go without people taking advantage, right? And I think, US has a very good culture of following up. I don't think in Serbia we do. I just try to buy a playground for my kids here to put it in. I called, very expensive, wanted to do it. I said, okay, I'll talk to you. They never called me back. If they did a follow-up, they would have made a lot of money. I would have said, yeah, sure, I want to do it. Then 2 weeks passed by, I kind of forgot about it. They never did a follow-up. They just lost revenue. It makes no sense, right? So in US, people do it after dinner, after an interview, after a good meeting, after a good, pitch meeting, after a deal closure to make sure everything's good. Take advantage of that and do a follow-up. I think that's always good. It always helps because you can leverage and do, in the fitness business, again, a great example. We do so many follow-ups and we have a routine. How do we do it? Of course, we always bring a different angle. We always offer something. But we have a lot of clients that, sign up after 2-3 months, which is a long time. But they do, hey, I forgot. Sorry, I was busy. Yes, I want to do it. Yeah, I forgot to do the payment. I want to do it. So follow-up, really, I think that's probably 50% of revenue you can generate just by doing that. So that's kind of if you want to start winning, right? And then I think 2 things if you want to last in a business, right? One is networking that I think most people, they're like, I have a great job. I have a stable life. I'm happy where I am. I have a good, group of friends. I know what I'm doing on the weekend. So they kind of stop networking, or they never start. And I think that's a huge, it's not taking advantage of people. There's a fine line, but I think try to meet as many people that are, again, different than you, maybe, in the same industry, but we're completely different. I kind of didn't do that in time. Now I'm starting to do it, and it's great. I actually created a lot of good friends that I hang out with now, which is great. But also, a lot of business opportunities come from that. A lot of new opportunities might come from that you are not aware of. So do it as much as you can. Mingle at dinners, go to meetups, go to business events that are within or outside of your field. And I think that is really critical. I don't think in Serbia we have a culture of networking. In US, maybe in New York, it's an extreme, but in most places there's a good balance of meeting good people and learning from them. I think that's really important. And then the last piece where I'm going to kind of leave you, which is this credibility and reputation. Again, credibility is, do people trust you? Are you trustworthy? Can they count on you? And reputation is the opinion of people about you, right? And I think as you build credibility, you kind of build reputation. And I think if there is one thing that you want to do business in US, this is the most critical one in the long run, right? And you can see this being important when you pick a restaurant. You look at the reviews. When you want to hire somebody, you ask people around, you look at the LinkedIn, you look at what did they do, what people think of them, right? You see how do people recommend you? Do they do referrals about the business you're in? Because you have credibility, right? They know that if they mention your name, if they recommend you, you're going to fulfill on that, right? And this goes, and I think we're getting more professional in Serbia, but, being on time, saying that you're going to complete a project in time, say you're going to do a follow-up in time, send an email in time, organize an event on time, how is it going to look like? I think this is credibility, right? And the sum of these little things over a certain period of time creates a reputation, right? It can be a corporate reputation, it can be a startup reputation, it can be whatever. But I think doing that is really important, right? And nothing speaks louder than this. So put it at the center of everything you do. Understand that, you know, it takes a long time to build it, but it takes a one bet, comment, message, conversation, meeting to destroy it, right? You know, I'm going to mention the joke we always say, from a genius to an idiot takes one step or one word. Always keep that in mind. You know, this is something that is critical. And I suggest, you know, people from Serbia kind of maybe don't look at it as much, but here in US, I think people do. So to wrap it up, I think, you know, this was just, you know, very high level, but learn the basics. Don't look at me like me when I went there and didn't know what Cinco de Mayo was, right? And, you know, it's, you know, the holiday of the Mexican holiday on the date. I kind of asked, is it the same every year? Well, it is, because it's a date, right? Don't be me. I learned it. I kind of felt it on my own skin. Do the things, you know, be kind to people no matter where they come from, how they look, what their background is. Simplify every time. It's going to help you. Follow up. It's going to bring you a lot of revenue that you're not aware of. It's out there waiting for you. Of course, network. There's never enough good people. The bigger the network, the more you're going to learn, the more you're going to develop, and the more opportunities you're going to create. And again, the critical one, in my opinion, is this credibility is this talk about credibility and reputation. Put it at the center of everything you do, and always work on it, build it, because it's going to last. And just as a, you know, I don't know if many of you saw a business case regarding Johnson & Johnson and Exxon comparison. So Exxon, there was a big oil spill that I think you all read on the news in the Gulf. You know, they kind of started covering it up. The CEO was on vacation, didn't fly, didn't think it's important. Very big issue for many people, bad publicity. And Exxon now gets very much harsh publicity, gets punished for the littlest thing. While Johnson & Johnson, there was a big tampering case with Tylenol, which is like aspirin here. People were, you know, a lot of people died because somebody was tampering with the bottles. They did a recall, went very public about it, created a whole emergency session on it. People actually understood it, appreciated, you know, they grew market share. And the funny thing is, I'm still tracking, even though this was a long time ago, every time, of course, they make new mistakes every day. People go much easier on them because they remember that it's something that was really right back then. And that's all about reputation and credibility. Keep it in mind, people will remember and care about it. So that was my, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. I don't know how much time I took, but, you know, being in the US market, it's great. It's a great experience. Working in corporate is one challenge. Now I'm kind of feeling the challenge of doing something entrepreneurial on your own. Both are great. It's a great market, not an easy market, but a market where you can learn, develop, get opportunity, get valued for what you are and how hard you work, and build a great career for you and your family in the long run.
So, Dušan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I have so many questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them. However, I wanted to ask you if it would be all right if we follow on the agenda that we initially communicated to the audience and leave them for the panel afterwards. Super.
Of course.
So thank you so much for that. And we'll be back with Dušan soon. And right now, I would like to announce our second guest today, an ambassador of Tesla Nation. And sometimes I get a feeling as one of our, or mine, or our biggest fans and biggest helpers. Joanne is a social entrepreneur and advisor to many groups on a mission to create systemic and sustainable social change through new innovations and approaches, which makes it, which sort of clicks with the idea of Tesla Nation. She is actively involved in many social innovation projects. She's a publicist, a community organizer, and well, sometimes I have to ask myself that how many hats that she put on. She currently serves as a strategist for the University of Chicago, Harris School of Public Policy, Obama Scholars Foundation, and she co-hosts the Track 2 podcast, where I've had the pleasure of being a guest. And one thing that I asked Joanne whether she would be willing to share with our community would be her inputs on American culture and the way that those of us who aren't born into it or who are not intimately connected to it can learn from and use in practice. So we'll be covering a number of areas. Essentially, we'll go through 3 groups. We'll go through verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and meetings, which should be more than enough to help out those of us who have a lot to learn when it comes to working with the folks from US. So having said all that, I just want to thank you again, Joanne, for accepting our call to share your knowledge and insights with our community. And of course, thank you for being an ambassador of Tesla Nation for all this time and helping us in all the ways that you did. So I was wondering if you'd like to share perhaps a few thoughts on what brought you here and what got you connected to Tesla Nation before we delve into what is our topic today.
Well, certainly, I want to begin by just thanking you for inviting me to join you in this forum. I'm so excited to be here. I think it is an accurate representation to say that I am one of your biggest fans, in part because I really see the work that you're doing or the vision that you have for Tesla Nation, this one of building a strong, healthy society, as something that is critical to the health of societies all around the world. So I'm always excited when we have an opportunity to collaborate on something. As for what brought me to this circle, well, that could go so many ways. I'm not sure we have enough time to cover that. But I would say that Serbian Entrepreneur Group is certainly alive and strong here in the California West Coast area. And we have several friends in common. And that is certainly one way to establish trust and credibility. These are all things that were mentioned previously, and we're going to talk a bit more about today.
Serbian entrepreneurs have been extremely helpful to Tesla Nation and many other initiatives, and I'm very, very happy and thankful that that's one of the ways that we got connected through. So one of the reasons why I reached out to you and wanted to ask you if you would be willing to share your thoughts and inputs when it comes to communication between folks from Serbia and the US is, aside from the fact that I've had the opportunity to talk with you and cooperate with you on a number of projects, is that I can remember clearly when an entrepreneur from Serbia had this impression that talking to you for I'm going to say an hour was one of the best and most helpful business mentoring sessions that he had, even though it was not planned to be a mentoring session. And this is a guy who's fairly successful and experienced. So that's one of the reasons why I thought that it might be beneficial for our audience for us to have this talk. And going straight into it. So what should we know about the way that Americans communicate, and what aspects of their culture, your culture, should we be most aware of? So obviously we have our first cue, which is verbal communication, and going into that, sometimes, as Dušan noted, Serbians can be perceived as being loud and aggressive, and I'm not sure whether that is true, but also I'm not sure whether when that happens, are they being direct or indirect. And going on to that, could you tell us what are your thoughts about the American style of communication and how direct we should be when we are, talking with Americans?
I think it's important to consider human nature in general. So you'll always have different personalities, and there are certainly people on both continents that have different temperaments, and there are people who are more reserved and people who are just naturally more extroverted. So anything I say today hopefully is taken in that context that it's a big diverse world out there, and I don't want to lean into any stereotypes. And at the same time, based on my experiences, I would say Americans are direct communicators generally when we're comparing other cultures. And my experience, collaborating with both Serbian entrepreneurs and others, throughout your community is that you're fairly direct communicators. Now, as to whether or not that's perceived as aggressive, gosh, that's really tricky, because certainly from my position here on the West Coast, I'm very familiar with American styles that can be perceived as not necessarily aggressive, but almost threatening and demanding in other ways. So what I take that as is seriousness, like a genuine intent to engage. And so I think that while some people may not know how to respond to that early on, there's nothing wrong with being yourself. There's nothing wrong with just saying it like it is, and then, sort of gauging how that landed with the person and saying, oh, can we start over? This is what I meant. That's acceptable. I also think it's really important to know that American business communication is slightly different than, say, American casual conversation. And it might be a little bit helpful to understand, my early career. So Dušan mentioned his age. I've got a few more years on him. So I will just say, having come from that same generation, I can tell you, I went from college straight into, corporations. I worked in banking, and then I worked in insurance, and then moved on to startup culture. And, through all of these things, there were three phrases that kept coming up for me. And that was, say what you mean and mean what you say. I liked how Dušan mentioned being simple. Tell it like it is how we normally would say that. And then the last one that's really important to understand is time is money. I don't always agree with that. And in a lot of cases, I think that it can be a disincentive for people to want to follow up because they don't want to bother you under this perception that time is money. And some of that comes from different business practices where people bill for their time in small intervals. So again, just to recover those, it's tell it like it is, say what you mean what you say, and time is money.
Fair enough. And while we're at it, even though you could say that in many instances, American culture is very, very direct. Sometimes, people and conversations are complex, and sometimes you cannot necessarily understand whether a message got through, whether the message was designed to tell you exactly what it says, or whether you should be reading between the lines. How should the folks from outside of the U.S. react in such a situation when they're not necessarily certain that something has been communicated to them directly? If I'm managing to communicate myself clearly to you right now.
You're absolutely right. To your point, conversations are complex. And even when you're speaking the same language, there are certain things that can get lost in translation. And I'm not really talking about the language now. I'm talking about nonverbals. So I think it's also important to note that, in my experience, North Americans, and I'm going to include our friends in Canada here and Mexico, we may not be relying as much on the nonverbals. That's not always true, because this is a big swath of land as well. And of course, this is coming from a Californian's perspective. I've lived in California my entire life. We will focus on what is said. We don't necessarily read between the lines as much, because then that's implied. And we have a special saying about making assumptions. I'm not going to give you that one here. Maybe you've heard it in the past, but the implication is that by making an assumption, you could be making a wrong judgment and really make a fool of yourself. So, I think the best thing to do when you're not sure if the message has been received is to ask what the person heard. It's absolutely fair. So it's sort of this active listening. You ask a question, I respond, and if that doesn't seem to be the response you were looking for, it's okay to ask it again or ask it in a different way. The other thing that you touched on there is that the relationships. So while generally we might be direct communicators, when there's a relationship involved, and this is to a point that was made earlier, we won't want to disappoint you or hurt your feelings. We might say, yes, this is a great idea, but we need more time to think about it. And we often will take an idea and just shelve it and come back to it. Maybe we're not ready for it right then. 2 months to make a deal, that actually is kind of short, depending on the deal. In my experience with multi-million-dollar deals, sometimes it could take 9 months. It might take a year to build that relationship. But the most important thing to know is that just by saying, yes, this is fantastic, we really like it, we're not necessarily saying we're ready to take action. And that doesn't mean that it's a no. It just means a not yet. And that's important. I do think that our sense of timing can be a little bit different. And again, relationships matter. We want to preserve the integrity of the relationship. Good communicators will strive to take care of the relationship rather than be right. But that's not everyone, and we can get into that a little bit more later.
Okay, most definitely. You mentioned say what you mean and mean what you say. And one thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is something that obviously Dušan put a lot of emphasis on, is how do Americans communicate or project credibility? Or perhaps one way that I could ask that is, how could folks from outside of the States communicate the fact that they should get a chance and that they are credible when they are communicating with folks from the US?
Ooh, folks from out of the United States communicating with folks from the US. Well, I think you just made the case for Tesla Nation. I think you just made the case for cultural informants, right? Sometimes to earn trust with an American, you will need to have an American present at the table who can endorse either the relationship or open the door to that relationship. Now, how long that American needs to be present in subsequent meetings, that really just depends on how the relationship takes off. Maybe it seems to be on the right track, but it needs a little bit of what I would call scaffolding, that's someone there. One of the things that I've observed in your team interactions is that you often approach things as a team. So in some of our early projects, you were present on calls with other development teams and with my client. And then afterwards, we would sometimes have a debrief. And during that debrief, we could talk about maybe some of the things that weren't clear to me or maybe weren't clear to you. That's really important. But to go back to establishing credibility generally, this works both ways, right? There's who are we to you and how do you see us? So early on in a relationship, an American is more likely to come in and sort of like explain what their lens is, what their worldview is. 15 years in a corporation or 10 years in a corporation, then into startup, then into some other realm. They'll try to describe who they are in that context. it's not always the same, but often in startup culture, there will be some degree of listing accomplishments. And those accomplishments are usually tied to things like money, how much money it generated. That may or may not be perceived the same to someone who's new to this conversation. It's not meant to be dismissive. It's meant to say, you can trust me. I've done this before, and there's going to be an outcome. We're very outcome focused. We want to make sure that we're not wasting our time, right? We want to make sure everybody's time is valued. So the other thing to know is that generally speaking, now I'm focusing more on startup culture, folks who embark on that journey are risk takers. They're motivated, they're creative, they're capable, and they're looking for partners who have those same qualities. So if you show up at the table and you're sort of, exploring how this might be a match, then it's really important that you're able to speak to your accomplishments and not feel like you're boasting. Just go ahead and explain what that background is, because that's how, the person across the table is determining whether or not this is a safe partnership, whether that's, a contract and an agreement for services, or that's someone that you're going to develop a new business with.
Super. So wrapping up sort of this batch of questions for verbal communication, we mentioned already what can be sometimes perceived as loud or aggressive communication. When it comes to Americans, how do we interpret and what do we do in a situation where there are either raised tones in a meeting or communication, or the opposite, long pauses?
Oh, those are very different. Sound and the absence of sound, right? Raised voices depends on the individual, right? The tone that you and I are talking at right now, that might be more assertive, let's call it assertive, than someone's comfortable with. But you can't really know until you're sitting in front of them, and they can give you a couple of different signals. One, they're starting to lean back because it feels too close, or they're leaning in so that you don't have to talk as loud. That's probably the best signal that they are comfortable and interested. Leaning back doesn't mean that they're not interested. It just means that they're trying to give you space to say your piece. So it's really about respect. I also think that raised voices will come up in different contexts. Sometimes it's the excitement of an idea or working through a problem. Other times it may be, solving a misunderstanding, and that could include some, perceived wrong. And that could mean maybe something missed a deadline, it wasn't QA'd the way it was expected, and that might engender this sense of urgency. And I'm talking about the American side now, where they will focus fast and furiously to try to solve this problem. And that gets back to that original concept of time is money. It's really strange, but time is money and your reputation is everything. That's what's on the line when you're solving a problem that's public facing to somebody's client. So those are the kinds of situations that may elicit a raised voice on the American side. It's just about problem solving. And as long as they know that you're sort of in the boat and rowing with them in the same direction to solve that problem, it usually takes care of itself. So hopefully that answers your question, at least in terms of volume. Now, in terms of quiet pauses and silence, I have noticed there are times where I'll be in a group meeting and there are, say, 8 people. In that group, there will be people who are also native Californians, but come from diverse backgrounds. They may not share as much, but they may need think time. I would call it think time. And they might not be ready to share like spontaneously in sort of a brainstorming fashion, that doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It doesn't mean that they want to schedule a meeting later. They may just need like literally 2 minutes and a quiet pause, like I just did, to sort of signal that they're considering it. So pauses can be a sign of engagement, and it's also a sign of respect. They're wanting to think about their words before they let something leave their mouth and regret it. So if you see a little bit of hesitancy, which can look like hesitancy, I think it's nothing to be worried about. And again, it's fair to ask, you know, do you have a question? It's okay to just ask that directly. We also have a saying that silence is golden. I think that is generally more for environments that could be work environments, although in the last 20 years we've had open office environments, a little bit different in the remote work from home environment. But generally speaking, I think that silence is something that's valued as part of self-reflection.
Super. So the main point I took for myself is that when I hear a silent pause, that I should not necessarily overanalyze it. That it's okay. It's perfectly human. So we've covered a bit about verbal communication. Could you perhaps point us to the most important non-verbal communication inputs when it comes to our communication with Americans? What should we have? Like direct eye contact. You mentioned already what leaning back or leaning in could mean. What comes to mind to you when somebody from outside of the US asks you how they should think about nonverbal communication with US folks?
I think we should, talk about eye contact for sure. Eye contact is significant, whether you're in a virtual meeting or sitting across the table from someone. Eye contact generally is something that you maintain throughout the course of the conversation. However, it goes with those silent pauses. So it's important to know that some people will make eye contact while talking. They'll take your point and they'll sort of look up. And when they're looking up, that's a sign that they're thinking. They may also look down. You'll see some people never enter a meeting without a pen, and they'll be taking notes as you talk and as they talk. It's not to say that they're being reactive or they're not as engaged. That's their way of being engaged in the moment. So eye contact is a mix. When there are words being spoken, their eyes should be on you. They should be. And likewise, when they're speaking, your eyes are on them. And it's okay to look away when someone presents a complex idea or is sort of in that initial phase of proposing something. Sometimes the looking away is simply an opportunity to recompose yourself, think about what you want to say, and then say it. So again, going back to mean what you say, say what you mean. All of those things come into play when you're sitting across the table from someone or just talking like we are now. I think the other thing that sometimes gets overlooked in nonverbal communication is actually a component of verbal communication, and that's accent. And this is something that, perhaps you can share some of your experiences with me about as well. But generally, I think it's important for anyone from Serbia to know that Americans, especially Americans from the West Coast, have a very generally limited experience with European accents because, if I drive north, I'm in Oregon. If I drive south, I'm in Mexico. If I drive 14 hours to the east, I don't know. I'm probably in Colorado. But whatever that is, I am not in another country. Everybody sounds just like me. So when we hear an accent on the West Coast, we are more likely to be open and curious and to ask you about where you're from. That is not the case in the Southeast especially in southern states, they might think of it as impolite to ask someone where they're from simply because their voice sounds different. Either way, what I think is really important for you to know is that we love the sound of your accent. We're not sure how you feel about our accent, but we have some idea about this. And, you know, it's an opportunity to educate people when they ask about something that's sort of qualitative in that way. So, oh, I hear your accent. Where are you from? It's okay to indulge them a little bit, but you can reveal as much as you feel comfortable or as much as you feel is psychologically safe in that moment. So you may not want to tell them, you know, right off the bat that you're from Serbia, because they, as you've told me in the past, they might get that confused with Siberia. And then the conversation has to take a whole detour. And that's crazy. Let's not. Instead, say something like Belgrade or Novi Sad, and then let them say, oh, yeah. And then they probably won't know exactly where that is. And you can continue to educate them. And, you know, people are quick on Google. They'll go find pictures. You can encourage them to add it to their travel wish list. And that's just a different way of establishing a little bit of interest and evening the playing field. So I know in the previous presentation, when talking about diversity, there was a comment made that, you know, it feels almost colorblind. As a native Californian, as someone who's spent her whole life on the West Coast, I can tell you that can be a little bit challenging, only in that sometimes it overlooks a person's lived experience. And that's really important because people who come from different backgrounds have different ways of communicating. And sometimes that communication has to do with authority level and it has to do with power. And it's always important to consider who may feel that they have more power at the table and how they're using that power. As much as we might like to think that it's an open playing field, we know it's not. And it's important for the person who is, you know, potentially a guest to that region to be treated with respect and warmth and curiosity and really just in the same way you would, you know, a valued guest.
So, well, I'm going to have a bunch of questions later on, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm guessing that many may come from the audience as well, and it's going to be great to hear inputs from both Dušan and yourself. But wrapping up our session, I just wanted to ask you about one particular, you know, set of interactions. So we mentioned tone, we mentioned body language. How do you put all that together into a productive meeting with you know, potential client or a partner, one that comes from US? Would you care to propose some etiquette guidelines that perhaps you haven't already mentioned so far?
So I think personal space is really important, and it can be difficult to interpret. So when you're seated, obviously there's a physical grounding presence to the floor and potentially something between you, a cafe table or a conference room table. That's a little bit easier to respect that boundary. I think that you have to go with intuition, and when in doubt, it's just really important to ask, is this okay for you? Does this feel okay? And, you know, what's the worst that can happen? They could say, oh, no, it's fine. It's not you. It's me. And that's most likely what they would do. And they may back up. And that is not to say that they're not interested. This is really about respect. And in our culture, there is a little bit more distance for Americans who are in a business relationship than what I've experienced in Serbian culture, even though, you know, I personally love the warmth and the focus and the intensity that I've experienced, but that's not true of everyone. And I think that's important to know. The other thing that's important to know is touch. So some people, you know, absolutely do not touch a business partner. They may shake hands, and that's the extent of it. COVID has complicated that even more, but generally speaking, a handshake is appropriate. For someone that you've met several times and there's some degree of warmth with, or say you're working in this kind of environment and it's time for them to take the microphone and go on stage, it would be perfectly acceptable to come over and put your hand on their shoulder or back. That's okay. When you do have a rapport and a good working relationship, that means you're talking about family potentially. Maybe you're talking about your weekend plans. Maybe you've invited them to do something like go to a ball game or some sporting event. That is, the relationship where you might hug the other person. It really just depends. And you'll be able to tell. When in doubt, let them come to you. That's the other part. So I hope that kind of answers your questions, and I'd be happy to go into greater detail, but I want to give you an opportunity to share as well.
So there's so many things that we can and will cover, but for now, sticking to the agenda of the event, I would like to sort of get to our panel portion of the event. And just again, thank you, Joanne, for sharing your input so far. If I understand correctly, there's some material that we might be able to share with our community later on after this event regarding this topic. So yeah,
well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Oh, hopefully we'll be doing a bit more of these in the future. So hopefully we can get Dušan back into the mix. Hey man. So one thing that was really interesting to me is how both of you sort of put a strong emphasis on credibility, and I'm going to ask both of you. So far, what have you sort of seen as the biggest areas of improvement for folks from Serbia when it comes to dealing with American business people? And I do realize that it might be it might be a bit putting you on the spot. However, we're here to help folks, and sometimes even tough love is appreciated. So. Joanne, you had the opportunity to work with more than a few people from Serbia. What comes to mind to you? What sort of inputs should they take away from this event?
I think it's important to just know who you're talking to, and recognize that it is a big, diverse country, and people have lots of different backgrounds and different experiences. It's quite possible that you've seen more countries than the person you're talking to, who may be, growing up in California or New York or in Florida or even the Midwest. I think it's important not to make assumptions based on physical appearances. It's very hard to tell. Let people tell you a little bit about them. Be willing to share a little bit about yourself. And, if possible, I think it's important to start relationships away from topics of government and politics. I think that's really critical, because it becomes apparent eventually through your working relationship what your values are. And at the end of the day, what makes for a strong, healthy society is people living a life aligned to their values and being willing to talk to people who are different from them. So that would be my recommendation.
So thank you, Joanne. So Dušan, you have a sort of a unique insight. You're well versed in the local culture and obviously in the US. So what would you say? What should folks from Serbia perhaps think most of when improving their chances in the US market?
Well, I think as you phrased the question, I think regarding credibility, I think that's the one as we discussed, very important. I think we as Serbians, we're very proud. We like to never show weaknesses. And I think we are afraid sometimes to say we don't know some things, right? And I think one of the best ways to build credibility that I've seen people do is to say, hey, look, I'm really good at these things. This is my areas of expertise. I can kill it for you here. This other piece, I suck at it. I'm not good at it. These guys are really good at it. I can advise you, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, use these guys. But for this is my area of expertise. I can do it. And then by doing so, right, and I've seen people do a great job at it. You're saying, hey, I'm being honest. I know what my strengths are. So let me, help you on what I can help you on. And the other is, let me give you a recommendation. I think I've seen a lot of people feel that by doing so, people will lose, people will think they're not as professional, not as capable, or they don't have the whole thing that somebody might need, which I don't think is the case, right? You got to show some vulnerability to a certain extent in a business, because, that's normal. Like, even when you're in an interview, even when you offer a service, right? Nobody knows everything. Nobody's good at everything, right? So be humble and talk about it. I think I've seen a lot of our folks are afraid to do that. And I think that's a big mistake. And they're going to fail, and they won't even get a job, or they won't even be trusted on things they might be good at because they lost credibility. I think that would be my point of view. Be more humble and be vulnerable. Be honest about it.
Super. And one thing that I took away sort of personally from your presentation is the following up. And sometimes I wonder why this isn't a staple in Serbian culture. And this is a question that we got from the audience: is it true, as sometimes folk in Serbia think, that being able to sell and present and network well, is this something that is ingrained in the American culture? Is this something that people in the US grow up with? Dušan, you're sort of you came into the American culture. What's your take on that?
I think there's different perspectives, right? I think there is a fine balance of being able to do a proper follow-up. I think Džoen mentioned, talked about it more than me. I think it's very important that, even following up has to have a strategy, right? You can't just randomly follow up things. I think you got to be certain what is the angle and why you're doing it. And I think that, even within networking, following up, and, I think New York is an extreme. I hated going to New York to a lot of dinners and drinks because it's always about business. How are you? Hey, by the way, I need this, I need that. Do you know this guy? Do you know that guy? And I hated that. I really couldn't distinguish. Is the guy there to see how I am? Is he there to get a good drink or food? Or is he there because he needs a favor, right? It's a very fine line. I kind of didn't appreciate. I think Philly and now Miami is a bit different. I think it's a finer balance that you can kind of say, hey, let's go for dinner. I need to talk to you about something. And then, okay, great. We're talking business. We're going to dinner. Let's talk business. Or let's go have a drink and have fun. Great. Then we don't talk about business. I think that line is more clear in many different. I think California, probably. I think Džoen, West Coast better than me. I don't know, San Fran, how it is. But I think those are the different things that, that are unique. So, and just last thing of following up to the point that she made is, I think people sometimes are afraid that they're maybe bugging people, or they're not being polite or appropriate. But this is part of American culture that I think is very well defined if you get to learn it. It's part of business. Even it's part of building network and building friendship. You got to follow up with friends. Hey, just checking how you're doing. It's following up. I'm just checking how you are. Here, it's not. Here is like, hey, you want to grab a drink. That's our follow-up. There is, hey, I'm just checking how are you. Yeah, let's grab a drink. Can you grab a drink in 5 months? That's okay. It's part of following, at least my experience. So I might be wrong, but.
We are here to soak up your experiences and your thoughts. So Jan, what did you say to this assertion that in America you sort of grow up with the marketing, sales, networking culture sort of ingrained to you from your family or school, upwards, and perhaps you throw in, if I'm not asking for too much, a few of your thoughts regarding specificities of the Western culture, the West Coast.
I don't like your question. I'm just going to go back to what he was talking about, which is that transactional thing in New York. So there it is. I wasn't comfortable with your question, so I shelved it, and I'm going to take this roundabout path to answering it. Like, this is actually giving you a scenario. So transactional Americans, really exhausting. And I can tell you from a Northern California perspective, not such an attractive quality. And a lot of times why people choose different coasts. The one thing I can say about Miami that is similar to, say, LA or other regions throughout California is there's a strong Latino representation. You mentioned Cinco de Mayo. That's part of my background ethnicity. And that's really embraced by all cultures. Everybody has something they like about the food, and that's great. There is also this sense of meritocracy, and I'm not sure if it fits the stereotype that you're describing, for caution. Do I think that growing up in my childhood experience, I was pushed to be sort of salesman-like and to think about ideas and ways to, be an entrepreneur and achieve things and be independent, work hard, and attain the American dream? Yes, and it's bit so many people that it's hard to know if that is an accurate representation of today. It's also, been weighed down by students' debt, by people entering university systems and going to sort of show their credibility through continued education. I know some people who have multiple master's degrees and PhDs. It doesn't necessarily get you more credibility on the business side. It's what can you do? Show me what you can do. Prove to me that you should be at this table and you should be in this conversation. So again, I don't know that that's true, that everyone grows up with that. In fact, here in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of families who value, the long path in education, and they hope that their kids will grow up and join institutions and get a pension and a good retirement and be able to pay off their student loans. So that's a thing. When you sit across from somebody who's chosen more of a sales role at a large corporation, that person's probably more willing to take risks and a lot more confident in their capabilities. And that can be great. It can be a really great thought partnership because, at the end of the day, they're capable of getting something done. Maybe the timing isn't right, and that's okay. You can always come back to it. So I hope that answers your question. That's also one of those great examples where if you put an American on the spot and you ask us to buy into a stereotype, we quite likely will just turn around and say, no, I'm going to talk about something else. And that's okay. I needed time to think about it.
Fair enough. So one thing that I wanted to ask you, Dušan, especially after what you just said, I think that you mentioned that networking is a very, very important part of business development and factors of success in the US. And I think you mentioned something like that you didn't do it initially, and that later on you only started doing it. I would think that there I'm not sure, obviously, whether there's a networking culture, in the States, especially after hearing Joanne. But can you tell us, Dušan, why didn't you go straight into networking mode? And what made you get into networking, and what did you gain by doing that?
Yeah, I think it comes. Yeah, I think I was very narrow-minded, to be honest. Being very honest, I think I didn't think of more of a long-term, broader thing. I was very happy with my position, number of people I knew, friend circle, everything. I was like, do I have time for that? Because networking is an investment of your time, energy, right? You sacrifice things. It's not like you can do it anytime. As you have a family, there's less time that you can do it. But I always looked at it more narrow of, job opportunities than more of a, developing as a person, just hearing interesting things, getting to know people that you might become really good friends with, like I did. I was just seeing some people that I met recently in Italy, and, we were hanging out. Now we're going to see each other. It's great people, smart, never asked me for a favor. I never asked them for a favor. Really cool, great experience. I also network with some people that, call me every other month to offer me a role or an opportunity, which, might one day intrigue me, and I might do it. I might jump the boat, which is also part of life, right? Which I think is critical, right? And, but the US is there. For example, I never played golf. So a lot of the networking that I was with wholesalers, so I went and I started playing golf now, because that's, to me, the best networking path you can have as a male guy in the beer industry with a lot of, that's what they do. They have a lot of money. They play golf, they travel around, and that's how they crack jokes. And you get to know them on the business side, personal side, the secret side, the ones they don't want to show right away. And that's kind of fun, and I want to be part of it. Of course, I'm going to suck at golf, even if I play for the next 30 years, because they're much better. But I'll be at the table. That's what matters, and it's fun. I actually like it. I don't do it just to network. I like golf. But those are the things that in American culture are common, and I like that. I think that's normal. You should have opportunities, venues, meetups that you network, and you might hate them. And you say, I'll never go again. Great, don't go. You wasted 2 hours of your life. Big deal. You waste them every week on different stuff. That's okay. But from somebody that comes here, blind dates or, these meetups about random stuff or stand-up comedy, whatever, you go do it. Why not? And I see there's more and more of that in Serbia, but you meet people that might have common interests. You might meet the craziest people you never want to be around. That's great. You at least know who to avoid in future. So it's a learning. I mean, every one of those is a learning. Sometimes it hurts more. Sometimes it's more fun. It's a learning. It's a process.
Unfortunately, even though I've got like at least a couple dozen questions that I would like to go through with you both, we have a limited slot for this event, and I would just like to ask you both if you would care to perhaps share with us some closing thoughts. What could be or should be the main things that folks from Serbia looking to succeed in the US by partnering up and finding clients in the US market, what could be the most important things that you would recommend them do? Dušan, would you care to
I'll let Jane go first. No, you go first. Jane, go first, please.
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. I think it's really important. I wanted to comment on golf. So for any women that are watching, no, you do not have to golf to network. You do not. My husband golfs. He takes our kids. My kids hate it, but maybe they'll like it someday. So yes, some people golf, some people go to dinner, some people go to dinner with their spouses. I think that's really important. And that gets into your question, Fakashin. What do you need to do? You need to just be a human being. Be yourself. If you like meeting new people over coffee or over lunch, that's great. If you can't meet them over coffee or over lunch, it's okay to ask for a follow-up call so that you can learn more about their business. That might be too direct. So you might say something like, okay, I understand the time isn't right now, but I'm trying to learn more about X, whatever that is in your industry, or I'd like to ask you a few questions about this and hear your experiences as I'm working on whatever it is. You can say some new project. People are willing to mentor and share as teachers. And in the same way, you can think of yourself as a teacher and a student. And so I think that's really important. Reach out, make those friendships. Know that we really appreciate your sense of humor and your experiences. And oftentimes we don't necessarily know what the next right step is, but that's okay. Keep following up, stay in touch, even if it's just through LinkedIn and commenting on someone's post. That's a really easy way to, have some sense of what they're doing. And, if something strikes you, then say, hey, I saw that you wrote about this. Can we talk about that sometime? I'd like to learn more about that. It can just be as simple as a friendly talk.
So be yourself and follow up is what I personally am going to take away from that. Dušan, what would be the key points that you would just hammer into the thoughts of folks that might be looking for?
To that, I think the first thing, be open-minded, right? I think that's one thing that people across the world lack, and I think people from Serbia sometimes lack, or even US, I think. Respect where you come from. You're going to one of the biggest countries that is very different. It's not perfect. It's not something that you can change easily, but try to adapt, try to integrate, know your strengths, be ready to learn, because I think I worked in many markets. I have a lot of exposure, traveled a lot. It is a country that will most likely easily accept you for who you are. You can become who you are if you work hard, if you are smart, if you have the grit, if you are resilient. You can achieve many things. I think there's ample amount of opportunities in U.S. that are ready for you to take advantage. I think as any country, there's never enough good people. There's never enough hardworking people that are willing to go the extra mile. And as I always say, dream big. I think I always like to joke with my team, dreaming big or small requires the same amount of time and energy. So you might as well dream big. So, have that in mind. Don't settle and say, no, I just want to have enough to, get a nice car and a house. Well, get a mansion or get a work you're on vacation from, or work from Caribbean islands half of the year, or do whatever, right? You will have those opportunities in a country like US. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of frustrations, a lot of setbacks, a lot of unfair things. But hey, guess what? Life's unfair. That's how it works. I always say, I think I think those Serbians are very different than Americans. Together, I've seen them. I have many Serbian friends that are working very highly paid jobs in US. They're very respected. Nobody cares where they come from, what their last name ends up, can they pronounce the name, what is their flag like, whatever. People don't care. They're good people. They work hard. They achieve results. They deliver. Man, sky's the limit. I think I honestly think it's one of the few countries that you can get that high up based on what I've just said. Keep that in mind and just work hard. That's it. And that's why I'm very excited about Tesla Nation. I think picking people who are open-minded, willing to learn, giving them exposure to US, giving them chances to work together with some American partners, exchanging ideas is what it's all about. And, hopefully in a year from now, it won't be €1 million, it will be 10, it will be 100. But more important than just the revenue will be great stories, people with a lot of experience, people, like I say, trained, coach the coach, people that, like us, went through the system, can now train other people to go through the system. And then it's a machine that, a well-oiled machine that will work and achieve great results. So again, pleasure being part of this. It was awesome.
Thank you so much. So what I'm personally going to take from your sort of, closing thoughts is, again, be genuine, be who you are, and also be very respectful of your surroundings, and have empathy and understanding for a different culture, which
and be humble. I would say the word that I'm looking at, it's be humble, both where you come from, where you're at, what do you know, what's your level of position, how much money you make, who you know. Just be humble. I think people like people that are humble, and it goes along the way. I think that's a critical one. And Serbian people are not known to be humble. If I may stereotype a bit more, we're the best, we're this, everybody sucks. Be humble, know your strengths, but talk about your weaknesses as well. People appreciate that.
And most importantly, follow up. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to follow up with both of you in the not too distant future in a setting similar to this one. I just want to thank you again for taking your time to share your insight and experiences with us. And looking forward to what are the next steps and projects that we'll do together through Tesla Nation. Thank you so much, guys, and huge thanks to our audience for pitching in live. This video will also be available afterwards for asynchronous viewing. And this is it for the first business event for Tesla Nation. Thank you so much, Joanne and Dušan. Have a great one. Have a great rest of Wednesday, and we'll keep in touch.
All the
Thanks,
best,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.